invite you to stand if you're able for the reading and the hearing of the gospel. It comes to us again from Luke's gospel, the 16th chapter, this time beginning in the 19th verse. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us is a great chasm that has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." The rich man said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, then they will repent." Abraham said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. I was at a meeting yesterday all day in Columbia. And when I was over getting some coffee, when we got there, I saw a friend of mine who came out of the church in Rock Hill that I served before I came here. His name is Mike Burgess. And he's one of my very favorite people in all the world. When I went to St. John's Rock Hill as the associate pastor, Mike was the president of the United Methodist Men. And he took that job very seriously. I'd been there maybe close to a year. And Mike came to me one day and he said, "Sandra, we've got to do something different with the United Methodist Men." I said, "What are you talking about, Mike?" He said, "Well, we meet and we eat and we fix stuff, but we never work on ourselves. We never work on our spiritual health." I said, "Okay, well, what do you want to do about that?" And he said, "I've got an idea." He said, "You know, men love tools. They love to get their tools out and fix things. And so I had this idea that we might put together a toolbox for men to help them fix their spiritual situations." He said, "I want to get a toolbox, and I want to put books and devotional material and maybe some movies or videos that have helped some fellas out through their situations. And then I want to put it somewhere where men can come by and sign these things out. All they've got to put is their name and what they took, and that way if somebody else wants it, we know where to go back and get it. And then when they're finished with that, they'll bring it back." And I said, "It sounds good. What do you need me to do, Mike?" And he said, "Well, I need a toolbox." And so we didn't get one of those little play like you're going to fix something that has a hammer and a couple of screwdrivers in it, you know, maybe a box cutter. We got a rolling tool cart. And Mike brought in resources of his own, and he would go and say, "Wayne, you got any books you've read, or what kind of devotionals do you use?" I imagine if we were doing that today, he would say, "What kind of apps you got, Michael, that might help me to help men to grow spiritually?" And he put them on this tool cart. And at first there weren't that many, but it built. And then he got up on Sunday morning. Mike's a little short guy. Got up on Sunday mornings, and he would get in front of the congregation, and he would say, man, we like to fix stuff, don't we? Everybody here loves their tools, don't they? Well, I've got some tools for you. And he'd roll the cart out and explain it. I'd ask him, where are you going to put this cart? And he said, on Sunday mornings, I'm going to put it outside the sanctuary. The sanctuary emptied out into one of the educational buildings with 2 doors. And so he put it there where when you came out to get on the elevator or go down the stairs to Sunday school, then it was right there. He said, I'm going to leave it there, and then on Wednesday night when we have supper, I'm going to roll it down into the fellowship hall, and then I'll roll it back up so it'll be there on Sunday again. And Mike didn't just put the cart out there, but he stood there. And so as Ty would come out of church, he would say, Ty, you got 4 kids, don't you? Do they ever drive you crazy? I got a book right here that might help you if you just get worried and stressed out about a house full of children all the time. Why don't you take it? And at first Ty would go, no, I don't think I need that, and walk on. And he would look out and say, Wayne, you just retired. Brother, I got a great book on how to pay attention to yourself in retirement. Why don't you check this out? And Wayne would say, I might get it next week. And he did this week after week. Now, what was interesting is nobody would take it at first with Mike standing there, but they might come back on Tuesday and pick it up when nobody was looking and take it home. And then eventually some folks started taking these resources that Mike had out there. And then they started talking about, hey, I watched a great movie. And these were not spiritual movies, but these were movies that you might go to the movie theater and see or pull up on your television that had a point to them that might help you in your spiritual growth. And they'd say, you ought to watch this. And they would pass it on. The tool cart became so popular that the women said, we want to check things out of the tool cart. And my friend Mike said, no, not right now. He said that we're working on men's spiritual health right now. He said, maybe later you can check this stuff out, but right now, I want to make sure it's available to the men. Well, that became very popular. Sometime later, Mike comes to my office and he said, Sandra, I need you to help me. And I said, what do you need, Mike? And he said, I need some space. Now, space is the one thing we didn't have. We had 2,100 members. We took up an entire city block, downtown Rock Hill. We had full daycare, full after-school care. We had every group in town meeting in our facilities. We had 3 services on Sunday. We just had all kind of stuff going on, and we had just finished a $6 million building dedicated to children and youth ministries, and it was full. And I said, Mike, all I've got is a storage space. You know, every church has one right now. It's our library, where you put the stuff, you know you're going to need it later. And so you stick it somewhere. And we had this little room off the old children's building that had those short tables and short shelves in it. And I said, we can push some stuff to the corner. You want to walk back here with me? And I took him back there and showed him. And he said, it's perfect. All I want is room for a coffee pot. He said, I want men, when they come in on Sunday morning or on Wednesday night or whenever, I want them to be able to have a place they can just drop by and kind of check up on each other. David, did you have a good week this week? Mark, what'd you do this week? He said, that's all I want. I'm not going to have a program. I just want a place where they can come and hang out before service, after service. And so we shoved stuff aside, and we had a little table we pulled over and that put the coffee pot on and a few chairs. And, well, you know, it wasn't long before he came back and said, Sandra, I need more space. And so we finally got rid of some of those things we had been holding on to have space for these men to kind of hang out together with other men who were trying to work on their spiritual health just a little bit. Maybe a year before I came here, Mike came to my office one day and he said, Sandra, I think God's calling me to be a pastor. And I said, Mike, I've known that for a long time, but I'm glad you've realized it. So now he pastors Zion United Methodist Church in Lancaster. Not a big congregation, but he loves them and they love him. Well, I saw my friend Mike yesterday at this clergy meeting in Columbia. And I said, Mike, how are you doing? And he did his wrist like this. He said, I'm all right, but my wrist is kind of sore. I said, yeah, I read something on your Facebook page. He said, yeah, last Saturday, my best friend and I were hiking up a mountain. He said, we had been warned when we started the hike to watch out for bears. And so we were watching for the bears as we hiked. He said, we were climbing this mountain. He never told me his friend's name, but he said, we were climbing this mountain, and I looked down, happened to look down, and my friend was about to put his foot down on a copperhead. And I said, wait, step back. And he looked down, and he said, there was this big copperhead. He said, both of our hearts were pounding. And so while we were waiting for our hearts to get back in regular rhythm, I took my hiking pole. He said, I reached over and I picked that copperhead up on my hiking pole. And we just looked at it and marveled at how God created this copperhead. Beautiful colors that blended in with the leaves and that blended in with the dirt and protected the copperhead. He said, I put the snake back down and we started breathing regularly again and started hiking some more, still looking out for the bears. He said, we were just about at the top of the mountain, just about finished our climb. And I caught my foot on a root and I went tumbling. He said, in fact, had it not been for my friend with a big hand, and these are his words, I would have gone over into the abyss. That's another word for chasm that's in our version. He said he reached out and grabbed me just as I was about to go over the edge into the abyss. He said God didn't put a copperhead and a root in our path as obstacles. He said, but there was this copperhead and a root in our path as opportunities for us to pay attention to where we were going and what we were doing. Remember, they were afraid of the bears. And so they weren't watching what was right in front of their eyes. He said, because I yelled at my friend, and because he reached out and grabbed me, both of us were saved. It could have been bad. In this parable, this story that Jesus told, we have a rich man. We don't know his name. He's not even the rich man, but a rich man, who dressed in purple, which was very expensive because purple dye was leached from the shells of mollusks. And that was a process that took some time and some attention. And he wore fine linen, which was also expensive. So we know that he had everything he needed. Plus, it calls him a rich man. He feasted sumptuously every day, which means he didn't open a can of sardines one day and decide that was his dinner. He had plenty to eat and all he wanted. And we have this poor, covered with sores, licked by dogs, man whose name we do know, Lazarus. Now, we know that a rich man lived in a fancy house or a gated community because it says that Lazarus laid just outside the gate of this rich man's home. Day after day after day. Jesus goes on to say, rich man died and was buried. Lazarus died and was taken to the bosom of Abraham, which we would call heaven. And rich man was taken to the place of torment, which we would call hell. Rich man, who had had everything that he could have ever needed in life, looked up and saw Lazarus with Abraham. And he said, Father Abraham, send Lazarus. See, he knew his name. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in some cool water and to come down here where I am and touch my tongue with it. Because I'm in torment down here in these flames. And Father Abraham said, I'm really sorry, but that's not possible. You see, there's a chasm, an abyss, between where we are, Lazarus and I, and where you are. And there's no way for him to cross to you or for you to cross to him. And so the rich man said, well, Father Abraham, I've got 5 brothers at home. See, we tend to think of rich man as just being mean and hard-hearted. He ignored Lazarus, but he loved his brothers. He said, Father Abraham, I've got 5 brothers at home. Send Lazarus to warn my brothers about this place so they don't end up here. In other words, they still can be saved. And Father Abraham says they have Moses and the prophets. They've got everything they need. They know already. They know how they're supposed to treat others. They know. He said it wouldn't matter if somebody came back from the dead. They wouldn't even pay him any attention. Now remember who's telling the story. It's Jesus. Y'all know what he's going to do in a little while. He's going to be killed and come back from the dead. I'm sorry to say that there are still plenty of people in this world that we live in who don't listen to that either, to the one who has come back from the dead. You see, we have Moses, whose job was to free God's people from being slaves and captives and to remind them along the way when they started grumbling and complaining about the lot that God had given them of all the blessings that God had done for his people throughout all generations. That was Moses' job. And we have the prophets. We know what Micah says. The prophet Micah says, what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's what the Lord requires. We've got that. We've got a big prophet, Isaiah. I want you to hear just one of the things that Isaiah says. These are the things that Father Abraham is reminding rich man that they have already. Isaiah says, if you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually, listen to this, and satisfy your needs in parched places. Remember what he wanted? Water for his tongue, because he was so parched. You and I have this. We know the Moses story. And more importantly, we know not just the Jesus story, but we know the one who came back from the dead. You and I have a friend who is able to say, watch out, step back, with a big hand when we're ready to go over into the abyss to reach in and grab us back. That's Jesus. And you and I also have the opportunity to be that voice and that hand that pulls others back when we see them going headlong into the abyss. I'll read it again. I don't trust myself to remember. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places. We have a saying here at Leesville United Methodist Church. It goes, see the light, be the light. May that be our task as we seek to do the work of the one who saves us all. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.